Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. The fit for this video is Wolverine in his correct uniform. In a recent video, I shared this book, The Religion of Whiteness, How Racism Distorts Christian Faith. And I said I would share some of the research that they go through in this book to buttress their argument that whiteness is a religion in and of itself that a lot of American Christians are committed to. And so I wanted to share some of the practices that the authors identify as related to this religion of whiteness. They include the highly selective use of Scripture, an epistemology of ignorance, veneration of the sacred symbols, which they identify as a white Jesus, as the merging of the cross and the flag, whether it's the American flag or the Confederate flag, and increasingly guns are a part of the sacred symbols. And then there's also the preservation of the racial order. And I wanted to start with the first practice, the highly selective use of scriptures. That's obviously the one that's going to be most interesting to me. And I just wanted to share the results of a study they did. And they start off saying, we asked a nationally representative survey of U.S. adult practicing Christians a question: how often should the Bible be used to determine what is right and wrong? And the options were always, sometimes, or never. About half the group answered always. In other words, these are people who think that the Bible should always be used to determine what is right and wrong. For people who answered always, they had 4 additional questions. They gave them examples of passages from Scripture and asked if these passages from Scripture should be used to determine right or wrong in the given situation. And the first one was a control question. They said, in the Bible, the Apostle Paul taught that people should not use unwholesome words, and that's Ephesians 4:29. Therefore, it is bad to use curse words. And then they had 3 test questions. The first was, in the system of laws that God gave the Israelites to follow, there were laws that protected foreigners from being treated unjustly. Deuteronomy 24:14. Therefore, it is good to have laws that protect foreigners from being treated unjustly. Second one, in the Bible, the prophet Nehemiah confessed sins committed by himself, his nation, and his ancestors. Nehemiah 1:6. Therefore, it is good to confess sins committed by me, my nation, and my ancestors. Number 3, the first Christians listened to the complaints of an ethnic minority group that was being treated unjustly and empowered leaders within that minority group to correct the injustice. Acts 6, verses 1 through 11. Therefore, it is good to listen to the complaints of ethnic minority groups and empower leaders within those minority groups to correct injustices. And then here are the results. They divided the groups into white, black, and Hispanic practicing Christians. And of the people who answered always to the initial question about when the Bible should be used to determine right and wrong, 55% of white respondents, 55% of black respondents, and 52% of Hispanic respondents said that because of Ephesians 4:29, it is bad to use curse words. And then for the 3 test questions, you see that for the white respondents, the number went down to 42% for the laws protecting foreigners question, 40% for the confessed sins committed by me, my nation, and my ancestors question, and 39% for the good to listen to the complaints of ethnic minorities questions. When it came to black and Hispanic respondents, however, the responses were similar to what they had for the first question. And so what they concluded here was that white Christians had a selective approach to Scripture, primarily that was aimed at preserving the racial order as they preferred it. And they go further. We conducted focus groups around the country, groups of 5 to 10 practicing Christians interviewed and filmed together, and asked them these same questions. Those who did not strongly agree with the above statements typically argued that the verses cited were cherry-picked. You cannot take a single verse and apply the principle, they might say. You must know the context. Such reasoning makes sense indeed, but in watching the videos we noticed an interesting pattern. Black and Hispanic practicing Christians who noted the need for context then proceeded to open their Bibles or Bible apps to investigate. White practicing Christians did not typically do this. Rather, saying that you need to know the larger context was a defensive tool, an excuse for their seeming disagreement with the Bible. They exhibited what we referred to as an epistemology of ignorance. That's one of the other practices. An actual concerted effort to not know. Our survey also included an open-ended question asking those who did not agree with the verse application to explain why. In addition to stressing the need for context, people got specific. Responses included statements like, foreigners in the Bible refers to legal immigrants, but America's issue is illegal immigrants who, because they're here illegally, should not receive protections and should return to where they came from. I am not responsible for what my ancestors did. There were not ethnic minorities in biblical times, and that verse cannot be applied to today's reality in the United States. In each case, the Bible takes a back seat to other concerns, despite these respondents having stated that the Bible should always be used to determine right or wrong. Other principles, these respondents seem to be saying, are more important. And then interestingly, for the epistemology of ignorance, they shared some research that showed that as racial tensions increased in America between 2019 and 2020, the number of white folks who said that the country definitely has a race problem went down from 38% in 2019 to 30% in 2020. Whereas for black respondents, the number who said that the country definitely has a race problem went up from 78% to 87%. In other words, as racial tensions increased, more and more white people decided that they did not want to acknowledge the existence of a race problem. And then when it comes to the veneration of the sacred symbols, I think these are interesting results here. Percentage of American groups agreeing that Confederate flags are more of a symbol of Southern pride than a symbol of racism. Over 70% of white Christians agreed with that, whereas fewer than 20% of black Protestants and a minority of white religiously unaffiliated people agreed with that sentiment. In other words, for white Christians, it seems to be important to their exercise of their religion to believe in the Confederate flag as a symbol of Southern pride rather than as a symbol of racism. So this is just a little taste of some of the data that is being marshaled in defense of this argument that there's something about whiteness that is heavily influencing the way white Christians in America are practicing their faith. I think they make a compelling argument. This is not remotely all of it, but if you'd like to hear more about it, I would highly recommend you go check out the book and find out for yourselves.